Hi guys, in this video I'm going to cover Python fundamentals. I kind of feel that the video is going to be like really long, so I'm going to include the timestamps in the description so that you can navigate through the video as you please. I already have a playlist in this channel on different object-oriented concepts in Python, but I felt that there were many things that I couldn't cover in those videos simply because they were not within the scope of those videos, right? And I was kind of assuming that people who tune into that playlist would kind of be familiar with Python syntaxes to some extent. So I'm going to talk about everything that I couldn't talk about in those videos about Python, right? So we're going to talk about how to write for loops, while loops, how to do if else conditions, and how to do simple exception handling, and the difference between lists and dictionaries and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be a very long video, but it's going to be the only video that you will need to get familiar with Python concepts like the syntaxes. So as you can see, what I have in front of me is I have the Spyder editor. So the Spyder editor comes by default when you install Anaconda. But if you don't have Anaconda installed, and if you just have Python installed, then you can still go ahead and install Spyder, but then that is going to be something that you have to do manually. But I would recommend you that you install Anaconda from their website. It's a really good package manager that comes with essential Python libraries that will eventually need. So yeah, you can also if you prefer using Sublime or Atom or PyCharm as opposed to using Spyder, you can do that and still follow along this video. But what I have right in front of me is I have the editor on the left side and I have the console on the right side, right? And as you can see on the top of the console, you can see the version of Python that I'm using. So if you're using a different version of Python, then the syntaxes will be slightly different. But yeah, that's about it. So let's get started. Let's start off things with a regular print statement. Let's do hello world. Let's print hello world. So I can either do double quote or I can do a single quote, doesn't matter, it's the same thing in Python. So if I say hello world and then if I run the code, so on the right side on the console you can see that the program prints hello world, right? So now let's assign variables. Let's assign variables. So in Python, you don't have to declare the type of the data when you're assigning the variable, as you have to do in the in for Java, right? You have to, whether it's an integer, whether it's a Boolean value, whether it's float, whether it's string. You have to declare the type of the data in the case of if you're programming in Java, but in Python you don't have to do that. It understands depending on what you enter, right? For example, if I say x equal to 6, x equal to 6, then Python knows that it's an integer, right? And if I say y equals to cat, then it knows that y is a string. So now I can do like the regular printing, and then if I run the code, right, it's gonna print the integer and then it's gonna print the string value, right? So declaring variables, assigning variables, very easy stuff. This is how you print, very simple stuff. Python removes a lot of things that it feels are redundant in other programming languages, and that way it's very clean, it's very simple, it's very intuitive as well, right? So that's the regular variables and print statements. Let's do a simple conditional statements, right? So let's say, for example, x equals to 0. Now if I want to do a simple if else condition, say if x is less than 5, then do certain things, right? So this is in Python you can do the operator, you can assign the operator like this. If it's less than, you can do this. If it's greater than, you can do this. If it's greater than and equal to, you can do this. If it's less than and equal to, you can do this, right? And if it's not equal to, then you can do this, right? So you can do like different operators. Let's do x is less than 5. And now, as you can see, the moment I pressed enter, it did a certain level of indentation, and this is how Python declares scope, right? So for example, in Java, you you declare scopes by curly braces, but now in Python you do it using indentation, right? There you don't have to do anything additional, or you don't have to add any additional symbol. So everything that I write within this indentation table will be within the scope of this condition, right? So let's say print hello, say thank you, and if it's not less than 5, then print sorry. Doesn't make any sense, but it should get the job done. So now as you can see, before running the code, we have initially assigned the variable of x is less than 0. Now we introduce a simple if else condition. So x is less than 5, right, because it's 0, right? So it's gonna print this, it's gonna print thank you, and it's not gonna print sorry, right? It's gonna skip that block of code. So if I run the code, it prints thank you only because x is actually less than 5. But now if I say if it's like 5 or greater than 5, then it's not gonna print this part because it's not fulfilling that condition, and it instead it's gonna do it's gonna run the block of code that you have in the scope of else, right? So it's gonna print sorry in this case. So if I run the code again, it prints sorry this time because it doesn't fulfill the initial condition, right? So that's simple if else in Python. Let me clear the console really quick, and then what we can do is we can talk about loops. So let's do while loop first. So let's say again x equals to 0, and then while x is less than 10, print hello. Okay, and now if I run the code, what do you think is gonna happen? So we initially assigned x's value as 0, and then we say x is less than 10, which it is, right? And then we're telling it to print hello. But like we never introduce a condition where this loop will ever end, right? We are not doing increment or not doing decrement. So if I run the code, what we can expect is that it's going to go to an infinite loop, right? So if I run the code just for the effect, so it's never gonna stop, right? So I have to stop the console here and go back. So why is that? Because x is always going to be less than 0 here. But now if I say x is, so after it prints, then x just increment it, right? So now it's going to increase the value of x, and then at one point in time x is no longer going to be less than 10, so it's gonna finish, it's not gonna fulfill the condition anymore, and therefore it will escape this scope, right? So if I run the code here, so you can see that at one point it stops because at one point the x is no longer. So if I say just like print x, so now if I run the code, you can see that after a certain point the x's value becomes 10, and since 10 is not less than 10, so it escapes the condition, right? So you can also declare increment like this, plus equals to 1. That way it's going to increase the value of x by 1, like that. And you can also do decrement like that. And when do we usually do decrement? So for example, if you have like x equals 10, and then maybe x is greater than a certain value, say 2, and then you can print like that. And then like if you have a greater value and if you want to do decrement, you can do like that, right? So it's a simple while loop. Now let's talk about for loop. So for loop is very interesting. So what we have in Python is we have something called range. So if I say for x in range, now with range, in the case of range, you can go about things in 3 different ways, right? So it allows you to pass in 3 different parameters. So the first one is simply passing a number and then just doing anything within that scope. Let me say hello. Okay, and what is happening here is it's basically starting from 0, and it's going to go up until 1 less of the value that you pass as the parameter. So 1 less of the value of 5 is 4, right? So it's gonna go up till 4 and then it's gonna stop. It's not going to include that number. So that is how it is designed, the function here. So it's gonna be 0 1 2 1 2 3 4. So as you can see that it's still it's like 5 times, right? So it's the for loop is gonna run 5 times, so you can expect that the hello is going to be printed 5 times. So if I run the code really quick, you can see that the hello prints 5 times. Or for f8, if I just print x, you can see these values for yourself, right? So yeah, it's not going to include 5, so it's not inclusive. And then you can do x range in another way. So for example, if I say for x in range, then if you pass two values, so if I say 3 and then 9, then what's going to happen is it's going to start from the value that you passed, the first value. So it's going to start from 3, and then it's gonna go on up till one less of the end value, the end value of the range, right? So 3 4 5 6 7 8, it's not gonna include 9, right? So if I just like if I show you print x, and then if I just run, if I just comment out this portion, and then if I just run, then say 3 4 5 6 7 8, right? So this is another way of declaring range in for loop. There is one more way, and this is also very interesting. So if I say for x in range, um, let's say 2 and 10 and then 2. So what's going to happen here is it's going to start from 2, and then this, it's going to go up to 10, but then it's going to skip, it's not going to go up to 10, it's going to go up to one less than 10. And the 2 is the it's going to jump from one number to the other by 2. And if I say 3, then it's going to jump from one number to the other by 3, right? So for example, this is the interval, right? So for example, if I say this is basically going to be like 2 and then 4 and then 6 and then 8, and then it's not gonna include 10, right? Because 10, the last end of the range, it's not included. So if I run the code here, print x, okay, they say 2 4 6 8, right? So if I say like 3, then what is gonna happen, right? So it's gonna start from 2 and then 2 3 4 5, right? And then 6 7 8, right? 6 7 8, and then it's gonna be less than that, right? It's gonna be over 10, right? It's gonna be like 10 or over 10, right? So if I run the code, so it's a 258, right? So this is basically how the three different ways of how you can do like a range, how you can declare a range. So yeah, so that's about while loop and for loop for Python. Now if I want to talk about, we did while loop, we did for loop. Now let's talk about how to store values, right? Let's talk about arrays and lists and dictionaries. So arrays and list, the primary difference, the only difference, I think they're very similar. Like arrays, lists, dictionaries, they're very simple, similar concepts for storing data, except that they have like very small differences, right? For example, in the case of arrays and lists, the difference is that in the case of arrays, they have to be declared, but in the case of list, you don't have to necessarily declare the list value, right? You don't have to insert the values initially. And list also comes in with Python, so you can do a lot of other things. So list is basically the one that is most preferred, and and what is the difference between list and dictionaries? The main difference is that in list you access the values using the position of the value, right, which is called the index. But in the case of dictionaries, you access the value using a separate thing called keys, right? So we're gonna see that. Let's start by initializing a list. So I can say like my list, and then I can be like this, right? And then I can do my list. If I want to add a value, I can add a value like that, and then I can also add another value, right? And now what's going to happen is the index value starts from 0, and then it's like that, right? The index value starts from 0 and stuff. It's very common in even like if you have had some sort of experience with Java, you know that the array index starts from 0, right? Not 1. So yeah, so now if I go on and like try to print the first the first value in the list, I can be like my list and then 0, right? So it's gonna print the value of 5. So let's run the code and see for ourselves. So yeah, it does print the value 5, and if I want to print the second value in the list, we can be like my list 1, right? So now the second value is 19, right? So if I run the code, it says 19. So yeah, that's how you, or if you don't want to do append and if you want to declare it right off, you can be like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and then you can like if we can like run a for loop and print all the values for x and my list print x, right? So that is gonna print all the values in the list, right? So you can also like run a for loop and print the values. So now this is more or less about list. If you wanna, okay, now let's talk about dictionaries. If something else comes into my mind about list, then I can talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about dictionaries. This is more or less what I wanted to show you, right? You can like do different things with list. You can like introduce list in list or whatever. Anyways, let's talk about dictionaries. So you can say my dictionary, and then you go to curly braces, and then you can have like keys, different keys. So like for example, suppose you have a company where you have like different employees, and every employee has a certain ID number, right? So let's say Steve is an employee who has an ID number of 10054, and then 1004, and then Bruce is another employee whose ID number is 1005, and then Chris is another uh Christ is another ID another employee who has an ID number of 1006. Okay, and now what we can do is we can access these values using the keys here. So it doesn't depend, it doesn't, the position here does not matter. So as long like Bruce can be wherever. So now if you want to access this value, the way you access this value is through this key, right? So this is the main difference between list and dictionaries. So if I want to do like say for example print, so my dictionary, and then I can be like Bruce. So now if I print, I should expect to see if I've not made any errors, so I can expect to see 1005, right? So let's see, run the code. Okay, so my dictionary, sorry, you do it like this, and then I can just like run the code and it says 1005. I also like included the curly braces here while accessing the keys. So yeah, good way to remember. It's actually using the third bracket. So you can use these like for example, if I say Chris, so now you have to be sure like it's case insensitive as well, so case sensitive as well, so you have to be careful about like how you mention. So you see it highlights. So now if I run the code, it's gonna be 1006, right? So yeah, That's more or less about list and dictionaries. Sometimes people also use tuples, right? Depending on your situation. But yeah, you can more or less start with list and dictionaries. You can like run for loops and stuff like that, and then access the different keys. Um, but I'm sure you get the idea. You can just like play around and do different stuff, right? So okay, now let's talk about exception handling, right? So how do I do exception handling? Okay, so for example, let me say um, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So I have like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now how many values do I have? 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So how many values do I have? 6, right? So the I have a list where I have 6 items, and if I try to print the 6th item, which here is 6, because like here the index value is like, okay, so let me not like include the index number here like that. So if I say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60, like I still have 6 items, right? So the 6th element is should give us an error because the index number starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And x, the 6th number does not exist, right? So if I run the code here, I should get an error, right? And it does give an error. It says index error, list index out of range. It is out of range, right? Because this the 7th item with the index number being 6 does not exist in this list. So so now we have an error to handle, right? So what we can do is we can do error handling by saying like try and except. So if I say try and put this block of code in that indentation level, and then if I go to the next indentation level and say except, so if you get an error, so you can also go ahead and like mention the error name here. By you can explicitly mention the error name that you are expecting to that will come across in this block of code here. But you can also be like very general and say just accept that if you find any errors, then run the block of code that you have here in within the scope of this indentation level, right? Within the scope of accept. So if I say so if you find any error, then print sorry, please check num again, right? Like a regular statement. And now if I run the code, so it says since it finds an error, it throws the error to this portion, and now it's gonna execute the block of code that you have in in accept, right? So it says sorry, please check number again. So but now like if I have like if it does fulfill the condition, if it's not raising a flag, if it's not raising an error, so for example if I have 70, so now you have a value which is in the 6th index value, right? So like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now it should print 70, right? And it's not gonna print the it's not gonna raise any exception, and it's not gonna execute the block of code here, right? So if I run the code, so it prints 70, right? So this is how you do exception handling, right? So yeah, this is more or less what I wanted to show in exception handling. And then you can like as I've said before, right, you can explicitly mention the exception here. Now the final thing that I wanted to cover in Python fundamentals is like talk about functions. We can also talk about packages and stuff. The video is already too long, right? So let's talk about functions. So the way we define function, I talked about functions in a video in the previous playlist, so I don't think I need to talk about functions. Yeah, I don't need to talk about. Okay, let me just talk about functions. So the way we define a function, we can say like define function, and then it can be like burgers, right? And then as a parameter you can like pass in something, but then you can also not pass in anything, right? So like if I say print I love burgers, right? And then I can have like another variable, I can have another function pizza, right? I can be like print um I I also like I have like videos on functions. I have made videos on functions, so I don't know why I'm making this, but whatever. So now if I want to call the function, I can say like pizza, right? So now if I call, you can call the function right like this, and now if I run the code, it's gonna print this statement within this function, right? So yeah, it prints this one, right? If I say burgers, then it's gonna print the above print statement, right? So now you can also, what you can do is you can pass in certain parameters. So you can be like x, right? And then I love an x, and then if I pass 50, it should give an error, but let's just see, let's just get the error first. So it says can only concatenate string value, because now you're passing in the integer here to this portion, and then the print is only going to take in the string variables. It can't concatenate a string with an integer, right? So you have to convert this to a string value. So the way you can do it is you can say str and then um, be like that, and then now if you run the code again, you should see I love 50. Okay, so yeah, I can just, yeah, okay. So that's more or less, if you want to go, if you want to see how like how you can create nested functions and stuff like that. I also talked about classes and functions in a different playlist. You can find it in the OP series that I have in this channel. And that's more or less what I wanted to talk about in this video. I felt that, you know, this should just get you started with the different syntaxes that you have in Python. Of course, Python is the most famous for its the use of libraries, right? Like importing NumPy as NP and stuff like that, or like import matplotlib as PLT. But like you can like import libraries like that and do different stuff. You can use the, you can like call the functions that are within that library, and the functions are so powerful for different libraries. And then every function, like you can go through the documentation to see what parameters the functions take, and do different sorts of stuff with them, right? And you can find the OP concepts in the OP series that I have in this channel. And whatever I wanted to do in this video is I wanted to talk about the syntaxes and make you more familiar with Python. If you're already proficient with Python, then this video is definitely not necessary for you. You can just like you didn't have to watch it. But if you have made it this far, then I want to thank you. And that's all I wanted to cover in this video. So see you next time. Bye. Thank you.